Welcome to the Still Darkness. Tonight we're gonna deep dive to an exploration of medieval history spanning centuries of European civilization. We'll traverse the Iberian Peninsula's lengthy reconquest, examine the Crusades from multiple perspectives, challenge misconceptions about the Dark Ages, investigate the Spanish Inquisition's mechanisms of power, and understand the training of medieval knights. The Reconquista represents the longest sustained military effort in European history, stretching from 711 until 1492. This wasn't merely about battles and shifting borders, it encompassed cultural exchange, religious fervor, and the forging of modern Spanish identity. In 711, an Umayyad army crossed from North Africa and defeated Visigothic King Roderick. Muslim forces, commanded by leaders such as Tariq ibn Ziyad and Musa ibn Nusayr, rapidly conquered most of the Iberian Peninsula. Within 7 years, by 718, nearly the entire peninsula fell under Muslim control, with only small mountainous regions in the north remaining independent. This swift conquest resulted from military superiority and internal divisions among the Visigothic nobility. Some local leaders chose accommodation. The Christian Lord Theudas negotiated a treaty in 713, securing peace and autonomy in exchange for tribute, gold, grain, wine, and oil. Early Muslim rule, later known as Al-Andalus, often functioned through pragmatic tolerance, yet pockets of Christian resistance formed in the northern highlands. In the rugged Asturias region, a former Visigothic noble named Pelayo refused submission. Around 722, at Covadonga, Pelayo's small band ambushed and routed a superior Muslim force. Though minor in scale, the Battle of Covadonga carried enormous symbolic weight, later celebrated as the miraculous beginning of the Reconquista. From this seed grew the Kingdom of Asturias. Pelayo and his successors claimed continuity with the fallen Visigothic realm. By the late 9th century, an ideology emerged emphasizing a providential mission to expel Muslims and restore lost territories. Coexistence and conflict reality during these early centuries was less about grand ideology and more about survival. The Christian North remained fragmented and weak, while Muslim Al-Andalus, with its capital at Córdoba, became a center of astonishing wealth and sophistication. The 9th and 10th centuries saw Iberia settle into a pattern. Muslim south and center, Christian north slowly consolidating. Under Abd al-Rahman III, who proclaimed himself caliph in 929, Córdoba reached its zenith. This dominance meant Christian principalities remained defensive or preoccupied with internal growth. Open warfare was intermittent, punctuated by truces, tribute payments, and alliances. Contrary to later mythology, constant warfare between Christians and Muslims was not the norm. Coexistence and cautious peace were often standard. Christian kings sometimes fought alongside Muslim allies against rival Christian lords, and vice versa. This era defies simple us versus them narratives. In the late 10th century, balance shifted dramatically in favor of Al-Andalus under Al-Mansur. From approximately 977 until his death in 1002, he launched annual campaigns deep into the Christian north. His death and the subsequent collapse of the Caliphate of Cordoba, which fragmented by 1031, utterly changed this dynamic. The once powerful Islamic state splintered into approximately 30 minor principalities, the Taifa kingdoms. These diverse states were often prosperous and cultured, but politically weak and frequently at odds. The 11th century opened with dramatic power vacuums in the south, and Christian rulers quickly exploited these divisions. One of the earliest major Christian gains was capturing Toledo in 1085. King Alfonso VI of Castile and Leon seized this ancient Visigothic capital, shocking the Muslim world. However, this success provoked powerful response. The alarmed Taifa princes called for aid from North Africa. The Almoravids, a confederation of strict Muslim Berber tribes led by Yusuf ibn Tashfin, answered. In 1086, they utterly defeated Castilian forces at the Battle of Zalaca, halting Christian advance. By the 12th century, the Almoravid dynasty governed Muslim Spain but grew increasingly unpopular. Christian kingdoms continued pushing when opportunities arose. In 1118, King Alfonso I of Aragon captured Zaragoza. To the west, the county of Portugal took Lisbon in 1147 with help from Second Crusade forces. A new Muslim power arose, the Almohad Empire. Even more ideologically zealous, the Almohads viewed Christians as existential enemies. They inflicted serious defeat on Castile at the Battle of Alarcos in 1195, postponing further reconquests. Yet the Christian kingdoms forged an unprecedented coalition. Pope Innocent III called for Christian knights to rally to the Iberian front. The result was a pan-Iberian crusade. The two sides met at the Battle of Las Navas de Tolosa on July 16, 1212, the decisive turning point. The allied Christian army routed the Almohads. The Almohad Caliph escaped, but his authority in Al-Andalus never recovered. In the aftermath of 1212, momentum shifted irreversibly to Christians. Over the next few decades, major cities fell in rapid succession. Ferdinand III of Castile and Leon captured Cordoba in 1236 and Seville in 1248. James I of Aragon carved the Balearic Islands and took Valencia in 1248. 1238. By mid-century, only one Muslim state remained, the Emirate of Granada. For more than 2 centuries, Granada persisted through diplomacy, tribute, and mountain protection. Granada's sultans became masters of realpolitik. In 1469, the marriage of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile united the two greatest Christian kingdoms. This union created a powerful dual monarchy with resources and religious fervor to take on Granada decisively. The Granada War, 1482 to 1492, was the final crusade on Spanish soil. Castile and Aragon methodically pressed into Nasrid territory. One by one, Granada's cities fell. On January 2nd, 1492, the Sultan handed the keys of the Alhambra to Ferdinand and Isabella, marking the official fall of Granada and the end of Muslim rule in Spain. After nearly 781 years, The Christian kingdoms had reconquered the entire peninsula. However, the capitulation's promises of tolerance were soon broken. By 1502, Castile required all remaining Muslims to convert or leave. The 1492 Alhambra Decree also expelled Spain's Jews. The multi-faith landscape that had characterized much of medieval Spain was over. The Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192, unfolded in the aftermath of momentous Muslim victory, bringing medieval history's most famous figures into direct conflict. Sultan Saladin, King Richard I of England, Philip II of France, and Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. When European Frankish armies seized Jerusalem in 1099, the Muslim world was politically fragmented and caught off guard. The 12th century historian Ibn al-Athir notes Jerusalem's loss occurred when the Islamic realm was weakened by internal divisions. Amid this disarray, voices emerged calling for jihad. One of the earliest was Ali ibn Tahir al-Sulami of Damascus. In 1105, he wrote a treatise urging Muslims to unite against Frankish invaders, warning that the Franks' success was a divine test of Muslim unity. By the mid-12th century, a new generation of Muslim rulers rose to prominence. Nur al-Din Mahmud of Aleppo united much of Syria. Under his aegis, a young Kurdish general named Salah al-Din gained experience. Saladin eventually assumed power in Egypt in 1169, ending the Fatimid Caliphate in 1171 and realigning Egypt with the Sunni Abbasid Caliphate. With Egypt and Syria politically linked, Saladin forged a formidable Muslim coalition. By 1187, he had united Egypt, Syria, and northern Mesopotamia under his Ayyubid dynasty. On July 4, 1187, Saladin's forces annihilated the Crusader army at the Battle of Hattin in Galilee. The Christian defeat was catastrophic. With the Crusader army decimated, Saladin swept through Palestine, capturing city after city. By late September 1187, he arrived at Jerusalem's walls, the sacred city lost to Islam for 88 years. The siege was intense but brief. Within 2 weeks, Frankish defenders recognized Jerusalem could not hold out. Unlike in 1099, when Crusaders massacred Jerusalem's inhabitants, Saladin preferred a more merciful approach. The city capitulated on October 2nd, 1187. The reaction across the Muslim world was euphoric. Saladin's entry was conducted with solemn piety. He spared the population, though ransoms were set. Muslim troops proceeded to purify the holy sites. The first Friday prayer after liberation, on October 9th, 1187, was an emotional event. Muhyi al-Din ibn al-Zaki delivered a momentous sermon glorifying God for fulfilling the promise that the farthest mosque would be returned to believers. Jerusalem's loss sparked shock and calls for holy war in Europe. 3 major sovereigns took up the challenge: Frederick Barbarossa, Philip II, and Richard I. Frederick Barbarossa led an army tens of thousands strong, but unexpectedly drowned in June 1190 while crossing a river in Anatolia. Without his leadership, most German crusaders dispersed or perished. King Philip and King Richard arrived in the Levant by spring 1191. Their first objective was Acre. Richard's arrival in June 1191 changed the situation dramatically. On July the 12th, 1191, Acre's garrison negotiated surrender. When disputes arose over surrender terms, King Richard lost patience. On August 20th, 1191, Richard ordered execution of all Muslim prisoners, about 2,700 people, including women and children. This appalling act enraged Saladin and his men beyond measure. In September 1191, Richard marched south. Saladin shadowed him closely. On September 7th, 1191, they met in open battle at Arsuf. The Franks won a clear tactical victory, though Muslim losses were heavy. By late 1191, the Third Crusade had reached an impasse. Throughout 1192, envoys passed frequently between Saladin's camp and Richard's. A notable degree of respect developed between the opposing leaders. By late summer 1192, a settlement emerged, the Treaty of Ramla. Crusaders would retain coastal territory while Jerusalem stayed under Muslim control. Latin pilgrims would be guaranteed safe access to visit Jerusalem's holy sites. On September 2nd, 1192, Richard and Saladin ratified the treaty. Muslim chroniclers express satisfaction at the treaty. Saladin had yielded nothing essential. Jerusalem remained in Muslim hands, and invaders had failed in their primary objective. Saladin died in March 1193, only months after the treaty, but his contemporaries immediately cast him in everlasting glory. The term Dark Ages conjures images of a benighted time, cities in ruins, knowledge forgotten. But what if this popular image is fundamentally wrong? Consider snapshots from this era. In 537, Hagia Sophia's colossal dome was completed. Around the same time, Boethius composed The Consolation of Philosophy. In the late 8th century, Bede taught that the earth is round, and Charlemagne was crowned emperor in 800. These examples hardly paint a picture of darkness. So why do we call it the Dark Ages? The term was coined by Petrarch in the 14th century to scorn post-Roman centuries as darkness between the enlightened ancient world and his own time. Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers amplified this idea, but modern scholarship has dismantled this myth. One crucial achievement of the early Middle Ages was preservation and cultivation of knowledge. Monasteries became the libraries and universities of the age. Benedict of Nursia, around 530, wrote the Rule of Saint Benedict. Benedictine monasteries required monks to read and copy texts as part of daily routine. Thanks to patient monks, great classical literature survived. Virtually all Latin works of authors like Virgil, Cicero, and Ovid that we have today exist because early medieval copyists preserved them. An outstanding example is Bede, who lived in the 7th to 8th centuries. His most famous work, The Ecclesiastical History of the English People, completed in 731, is a monumental history. Bede helped establish the BC/AD dating system. In his treatise on the reckoning of time, he explained the spherical shape of the earth. clear evidence that educated people understood basic astronomy. Charlemagne, though possibly only semi-literate himself, deeply valued learning. In 789, he issued an edict ordering establishment of schools at monasteries and cathedrals. He gathered the greatest scholars at his palace court in Aachen. Together, they corrected ancient manuscripts and produced works. Out of this circle came Carolingian minuscule, a clear handwriting style that made reading easier. This script is the ancestor of fonts we use today. Without this Carolingian push, many works might have disappeared. Art and literature continued with distinctive early medieval flair blending Christian, Roman and barbarian influences. In Anglo-Saxon England, the epic Beowulf was composed, a magnificent poem rich in symbolism. Religious literature also abounded. Visual arts saw an explosion in intricate artwork. One crown jewel is the illuminated manuscript. The Book of Kells, created around 800, is often regarded as the peak of illuminated manuscripts, with pages teeming with vibrant designs so detailed that even modern magnification reveals new marvels. Architecture also advanced. Charlemagne's palace chapel at Aachen, completed around 805, featured a domed octagonal church inspired by Byzantine architecture. The Byzantine Empire never stopped building. Hagia Sophia featured a dome 102 feet across, hovering 180 feet above the floor, an engineering feat that pushed architectural boundaries. After the Western Roman Empire fell, new kingdoms arose that created their own stability. Various Germanic kingdoms issued written law codes showing active effort to govern justly. These legal texts are evidence of societies striving for order and justice. The Frankish kingdom expanded, and by the 8th and 9th centuries, under the Carolingians, had become an empire covering much of Western and Central Europe. Charlemagne's empire had strong administrative backbone. He sent out royal agents to oversee local authorities and standardize measures. In agriculture, the spread of the heavy plough was a major development. This heavy-wheeled plough could turn over dense soils, significantly improving crop yields. The three-field crop rotation system emerged around the 8th or 9th century, increasing yield and improving soil fertility. Watermills became truly common in early medieval Europe. By the 8th century, watermills freed people from hours of manual grinding. The spread of the watermill is sometimes called the First Industrial Revolution. The stirrup, likely brought from Central Asia around the 7th to 8th century, revolutionized cavalry by giving riders greater stability, paving the way for medieval knights. Trade never died, it retracted and reconfigured. By the 7th century, international routes were re-emerging. Archaeological evidence provides proof of these networks. By the 9th and 10th centuries, trade was vigorous enough that historians speak of commercial rejuvenation. The Byzantine Empire, while Western Europe was rebuilding, was often the richest and most advanced state. Emperor Justinian I produced the Corpus Juris Civilis, comprehensive code of Roman law that became foundation for modern civil law traditions. Constantinople was a powerhouse, possibly the largest city in the world, around 600. It featured advanced urban amenities and a famous university. Byzantines read Homer, Plato, and Aristotle in original Greek and preserved them. The Byzantine Empire played a key role in converting Slavs to Christianity. In the 9th century, Byzantine missionaries Cyril and Methodius developed the first Slavic alphabet and translated the Bible into Old Slavonic. The so-called Dark Ages were, in reality, a time when seeds of modern European civilization were planted and nurtured. Knowledge survived, art flourished, political order was re-established, and technology advanced. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the medieval church faced growing challenges from heresies, religious movements contradicting official doctrine. In 1231, Pope Gregory IX established the medieval Inquisition, commissioning specially appointed inquisitors to travel across Europe and root out heresy. These papal inquisitors were granted extraordinary authority. They could override local church courts, investigate anyone suspected of unorthodox beliefs, and deliver verdicts with secular force backing. From the start, groundwork was laid for potential abuse. Inquisitors operated under a procedure called inquisitio that flipped normal justice. Instead of being presumed innocent, the accused heretic was treated with deep suspicion. Trials were conducted in secret, and usual safeguards for defendants were stripped away. Early inquisitors like Conrad von Marburg gained infamy for unbridled zeal. Conrad virtually assumed the accused were guilty until proven innocent. He accepted almost any accusation as true and quickly consigned those who would not confess to the stake. These tactics spread panic. Inquisitors wrapped their operations in a veneer of legality while quietly rigging the rules. The inquisitorial procedure was designed to favor prosecution at every turn. One major difference was the use of secrecy and anonymous accusations. Identities of accusers and witnesses were kept secret. The accused often had no way to rebut testimony. Inquisitors also twisted normal standards of evidence. Mere whispers of rumor or bad reputation could justify arrest. Hearsay and suspicion carried weight. Many inquisitors presumed the accused was lying and saw their role as extracting a confession by any means. Sometimes inquisitors resorted to outright fraud. In Carcassonne, around 1300, Franciscan friar Bernard de Lisieux discovered that inquisitors' registers listed testimony from people who did not exist. They were simply inventing witnesses. Church law technically forbade torturing a suspect more than once, but experienced inquisitors found loopholes. By defining new questions or charges, the inquisitor could effectively bypass the one-time torture rule. No aspect of the Inquisition's work is more infamous than its use of torture. In theory, torture was a last resort. In practice, it became routine. The torture chamber was equipped with grim devices. The Spanish Inquisition formalized 3 standard methods: the garrucha, suspending victims by rope; the toca, water torture; and the potro, the rack. Inquisitors favored these because they left no immediate visible injuries, no shedding of blood, thus sidestepping the Church's ban on clerics spilling blood. Under such torment, victims typically confessed to anything the inquisitors wanted. whether true or not. After a torture session, they brought the bruised prisoner back to courtroom the next day to repeat the confession freely, and only then was it deemed valid. If a victim retracted their confession, inquisitors felt justified in simply resuming torture. It was a deadly trap. Maintain innocence and torture continues. Confess and you damn yourself. Even inquisitors themselves knew the unreliability of confessions obtained by torture. Yet this did not stop the practice. Medieval critics voiced the same concern. Under such methods, people will say anything to end the pain. Although inquisitors professed to act purely for the faith, money and property often lurked in the background. When a person was convicted of heresy, the Inquisition could impose heavy fines or confiscate property. The Spanish Inquisition is notorious in this regard. One punishment above all made it attractive to Spain's Catholic monarchs: confiscation of convicted heretics' properties. Some historians argue that Ferdinand and Isabella welcomed the Inquisition as a tool to finance the crown. For inquisitors on the ground, temptation of personal enrichment was real. Inquisitors drew salaries from fines collected. They could charge fees for managing confiscated estates. Wealthy prisoners could sometimes buy leniency by paying bribes. Perhaps the most egregious case of corruption was Diego Rodriguez de Lucero, an inquisitor in Córdoba around 1500. Lucero was widely reviled for abusing his power, inventing charges against affluent families to take their money. He allegedly used the Inquisition to satisfy his lust, having 2 men burned to death so he could take their wives as mistresses. Eventually, public outcry grew so intense that the crown intervened. In 1507, he was arrested and removed from office, showing that there were limits, though they came only after untold damage. The Inquisition did not operate in isolation from worldly politics. Secular rulers realized this formidable religious tribunal could be turned into a political weapon. From its inception, the medieval Inquisition had to cooperate with princes and magistrates to enforce sentences. The Spanish Inquisition likewise served state policy. Ferdinand and Isabella instituted it not only to purify religion, but also to cement their recently unified kingdom. By targeting conversos, converted Jews, and moriscos, Muslim converts, the crown could enforce religious homogeneity and remove potential threats. The Inquisition effectively became an arm of government. The Inquisitor General answered to the crown, and inquisitors had royal authority to call on troops. Under Thomas de Torquemada, the first Grand Inquisitor, approximately 2,000 conversos were burned for heresy. The sum of all abuses was a pervasive climate of fear. Inquisitors deliberately used fear as a tool to enforce conformity. The mere possibility of being denounced and hauled before the Holy Office was a fear people lived with. One way the Inquisition spread fear was by fostering a culture of denunciation. It routinely issued edicts of faith, urging the faithful to report any suspected heretical behavior. Failing to inform itself could be treated as a crime. This policy turned neighbor against neighbor and sowed distrust. Another potent instrument of fear was the spectacle of public punishment, the auto da fe, act of faith. At these ceremonies held in city plazas, sentences were announced and carried out. Those found guilty were paraded in penitential garb, and unrepentant would be handed over to secular authorities for execution, typically by burning. Inquisitors intended these spectacles to instill dread. The message to onlookers was unmistakable. This is what happens to those who stray from the faith. Fear permeated all levels of society. This stifled intellectual and spiritual life. Inquisitorial censorship banned books and policed ideas. The Inquisition's reign of fear had deep and long-lasting effects. It coerced not only actions but thoughts by betraying the very spiritual values it claimed to protect. Faith became tinged with terror. People obeyed not out of conviction or love, but out of fear. The story of the medieval Inquisition is a warning in how absolute certainty and unchecked authority can corrupt a noble cause. What began as an effort to protect religious orthodoxy became machinery of cruelty. Inquisitors, convinced they served a higher good, employed unholy means. Justice, mercy, and compassion were the real casualties. The abuses show the danger of any institution that operates without accountability, fueled by its own fanaticism. In defending the faith, they often betrayed its core values. Yet within the dark history, we find glimmers of hope. Individuals like Bernard de Lisieux, who bravely spoke out against injustice. The legacy of the Inquisition is complex. On one hand, it enforced religious uniformity, but it achieved this at terrible human cost, and arguably at the cost of the Church's moral authority. In looking back, we remember not just the notorious inquisitors, but their victims, and the few who dared to oppose them. Their suffering and courage speak across centuries as a grim lesson in the misuse of power, one that remains relevant whenever ideological or religious zeal threatens to override our common humanity.